Hello, my name's Brian Pollard. I'm an artist living in Plymouth. Welcome to my studio. I thought it might be nice to have a look around an artist studio and see how the paintings are produced and look at some of the pictures in more detail. You can see some of my paintings behind me and perhaps some of you recognise the style, having seen them in a gallery in Plymouth. Or perhaps you remember last year when St. Luke's had the Elmer Parade and I was lucky enough to be commissioned to paint the first elephant. These kind of images and style of paintings called naive or primitive. And what that means is that the artists who paint them are usually untutored. And that certainly applies to me and the late great Beryl Cook, who was probably one of the most famous naive painters in this country and lived in Plymouth. The idea of this style of painting is to use bright, bold colours and often quite simple, childlike images to communicate the message in the painting to the viewer. And I guess the main message is to try and cheer everybody up, and that's why these colours are used. And certainly to try and brighten up a dull day, especially in the troubled times that we're having at the moment. Several famous artists painted in this style, for instance, Henry Rousseau and Alfred Wallace, and they certainly were untutored. But other artists actually did go away to art college and decided to paint in a simple style. And one thinks of Lowry, who was a very famous artist. The bright paintings are produced by using layers of paint. So most of the colours that you see have had 4 or 5 coats of paint to give them that intensity of colour and make them bright. This is very much a characteristic of naive painting. The other thing we do in this style of art is we're not trying to paint something as a representational image. That is, we're not trying to reproduce a photographic image of a place. So there is a lot of artistic license. Buildings can be moved around, objects can be put in different places, colours can be changed, and everything is generally simplified. And we'll have a chat about that as we look at some more of the paintings in a few moments. Behind me are 2 easels. I'm usually working on both at the same time. I'm usually painting 3 or 4 different paintings. This is because I use acrylic paints, and acrylic paints are water-based and very fast drying. Because I have to paint a lot of layers and I paint the background first, it gives them time to dry, and I'm then able to build up the layers of each painting, which I'll show you later on. The other thing you should notice when we look at the paintings is, like a lot of artists, I put small references in that sometimes people don't know about, some of which are secret, some of which I'll discuss with you. I usually put myself in the painting, so you have to look very carefully in the window to see if I'm at an easel painting, or at other times I'm with my wife Jane and she wears a red dress, and you can tell me because I'm the only person in the picture with grey hair. The other thing that's in most of my paintings is a small black dog who's called Hector. One of the reasons for putting these little images in is that I do a lot of school workshops, and children like looking for the images, and I think we do as well, searching the painting to find little things that we might recognise. And that makes it a bit more exciting, but it also makes it that you look at the picture in a little bit more detail and tend to scan it and look at things and see maybe something that you've not seen in the past. And I think that's an exciting thing about painting. You can often look after it day after day and then recognise something that you haven't seen. So we go on now to have a look at a few of the pictures that are behind me and discuss the process of how the art's built up. This is the painting you saw behind me earlier, which is fireworks on the Hoe. You'll see that all the bright colours of the fireworks, all these firework lines needed 4 or 5 coats. And in fact, the yellow, which is quite a thin paint, needed 6 or 7 to give that intensity of colour we were talking about. Now we have to look at the picture to see if we can find the little dog Hector, which I'll just go into, and you can just see him there in the middle. And then if we move to the left looking for somebody with grey hair and my wife in a red dress, you'll see me on the left hand side. This is the picture of the dolphin, again the one hanging behind the easel. Quite a large painting. This one was reproduced as a print. And this time, if we look in the windows, we might see that I'm painting at an easel. Right at the very top, just a faint outline of an easel, me with a paintbrush. Always look in the windows because there are often quite interesting things happening. There might be a dog or a cat sitting there, or a vase of flowers. There's a lot of activity, a lot of colour, people carrying balloons. Cats are always very popular and lovely to paint. This is a picture of two cats sitting on the window and overlooking Plymouth Hoe. You'll see that there's a lot of balloons in my paintings, and in fact there's very few paintings I now paint without balloons in them. The reason for that is that balloons add colour in the sky where you normally can't put bright colours, and they help movement. The other thing you might notice in my paintings are the patterns. The clouds are often in patterns of 3 or 5, and the reason for that is that it gives a balance to the painting. Clouds again are introduced to produce colour and movement. Now we'll focus in to see if we can see where I am on this painting. I think I'm hiding away on the right hand side. Yes, there you are. You can just about see me there, but Hector is way on the other side. There he is having a stroll on the hoe. This is a recent, very busy painting of the red arrows. Again, one of my favourite compositions, because it's a way of getting the bright colours into the sky with the plains and the vapour trails. I got a bit carried away on this painting. There's rather a lot of people. It's a very, very hectic and busy day on Plymouth Hoe. Again, if we try and find where we are on this picture, you will see that I'm pretty much in the centre with the white hair and Jane in the red dress. Hector's close by this time, is on the right hand side. This is a place you'll all recognise. It's of course Eden Centre in Cornwall. The reason I'm showing you this picture is, again, look at the bloom patterns, and also specifically the cloud patterns. The triangular pattern of the clouds, which gives that nice balance in the sky. But this, in fact, is the only picture I've ever painted of the Queen, and she's arriving in Cornwall in the Royal Hot Air Balloon. You will just see her there with a crown. So quite an unusual picture, and again one I've kept back for my own collection. Not all my paintings are of this country and Devon and Cornwall. Often when I'm on holiday I make pen and ink sketches, and when I come back work up to paintings. This is one of my very, very favourite paintings that took a long time to paint, of a small town in Tuscany called San Gimignano, with a magnificent field of sunflowers. This is called the New York of Italy. It's a medieval town with lots of tall towers. These were built because the people who lived in the town were in competition with who could build the biggest tower. So as soon as somebody built one tower, another person came along and built one even bigger. So we've got this magnificent landscape. And this has the 5 pattern balloons that you don't see in many of my paintings. And it's a slightly different tone of blue in the sky. The sunflowers were an absolute nightmare to paint, as each of those petals had 7 coats of paint. I thought it'd be interesting to see an early picture, and this painting was produced over 30 years ago at one of my favourite places, Mousehole, looking across from the top of Mousehole to Mounts Bay with St Michael's Mount in the background. The interesting part of this picture is the balloons. In fact, you can tell it's an early picture because the balloons have 3 lobes. I stopped painting the balloons in that style quite early on, producing just single lobes so that I could produce more complicated patterns and make them more interesting. This is a very large painting I produced several years ago for Devon Life, which is a map of Devon with some of its famous landmarks, buildings and events. We just go and have a look in detail at a couple of areas. We'll zoom down to Plymouth on the left-hand side, and you can see just below Smeaton's Tower is Lawrence of Arabia riding a camel. Lawrence came down here after the war to work on a secret project at RAF Mountbatten. If we now go over to the right towards Totnes, which is famous for its castle, but just to the left of the castle is a plaque to the Brutus Stone. The Brutus Stone is a stone that's laid in the wall of the High Street about halfway up on the right hand side, and it's to commemorate Brutus coming to Britain and declaring the discovery and naming it. If we go up a little bit further, we'll have a look at the Hound of the Baskervilles, who is sitting on a tor. You can probably just make him out. And beneath him on the left is Widdicombe Fair. Below is a London bus on London Bridge, which was built from granite taken from Dartmoor. And further down we have Walter Raleigh's house, and to the left another picture of Totnes High Street. To the right is a mammoth that was discovered in Kent's Cavern. And over on the left hand side there is the infamous Dartmoor prison on a very cold and barren Dartmoor day. Paintings are produced on different scales, and this is a very large painting, over 1.5 meters tall. It's a picture of the Mayflower to celebrate Mayflower 400, which is happening this year, and has been produced for a Plymouth primary school, where I'm going to be working with the whole school, over 300 children. The idea is that I paint the background at the top, and then the children will add things on the lower part on Plymouth Hoe. The smaller children will actually just put thumbprints on the picture, but I think it's going to be a great memorial of a painting to have around for the school to remember that special year and the special event that occurred in Plymouth in September. The other thing you may have noticed in all my Hoe paintings is that I never actually paint Drake's Island. There was only one painting I produced many, many years ago with Drake's Island on. And the reason I don't do it anymore is that when I first came to Plymouth many years ago, Drake's Island was used as an adventure centre for children and was a great place for young adults to go and learn to abseil, canoe, climb, all exciting things. Of course, it hasn't been used for that for many, many years. So until it goes back to its original use, I won't be painting any Drake's Island in Plymouth Hoe. So have a look at the pictures of Plymouth you see of mine. There is one picture that I painted for a school that looks like it has Drake's Island in it, but in fact it isn't Drake's Island. It's St. Michael's Mount that I moved from Cornwall into Plymouth Sound. Now this is going to the other end of the scale in size. These are two small paintings. The one on the right of the Island House in Southside Street, and the one on the left, an image of St. Ives. You can see that they are both very simplified images, especially the one on the left, with the pattern of the balloons, 3 balloons on the right hand side, and a nice pattern of 4 boats on the left. These small paintings are painted on canvas board rather than canvas, and are 7 inches by 5 inches. This is a night scene, which again is always good to paint, with plenty of yellow with the stars and the moon in the sky. And this one has a shooting star, and in the background there's a little reference to Plymouth with Smeaton's Tower standing out on the Hoe. So this is a slightly different angle shot of my studio. This is the view I see when I come in. You can see behind me a table laid out with all the different paints. and some larger jars of paints and lots of brushes. That's one of the first things I discovered as an artist, why you need lots of brushes, because when you're painting on a regular basis you soon get through them. We'll have a detailed look at the acrylic paints. I use several kinds of paints. My main paint's called Liquitex, and it's a high quality artist paint that produces very good and light fast colours. Some other areas where I'm painting large areas or need a slightly different shade, then I tend to use the paints in the big jars. These are reed paints, but again a very good quality paint that reproduces very well. This is a close-up of the table. You can see the paints in more detail, and behind are the two easels with works that are in progress or completed, and behind a slightly different view of the ones hanging on the wall. We'll now go up and have a look at those paintings in close-up. Well, here we're going to have a look at how the paintings are built up. I usually paint on canvas and occasionally canvas board, and on the easel behind is a small canvas, about 12-inch square. I always start by painting the background as we discussed earlier on, and the reason for this is so that the canvas is immediately covered with colour and we start off with a very bright painting. There are usually 2 or 3 zones of colour. In this picture at the moment there's just the 2 zones, Plymouth Hoe in green and the blue background, which could represent the sea or the sky. The next thing I would probably do is put in Smeaton's Tower because this will affect the composition of the painting, what I will paint in the sky and put in the sea and also on the hoe. So we'll have a look at the moment of the one with Smeaton's Tower in. These blues have had 4 or 5 coats, and the same with the green. Smeaton's Tower has now appeared, and I decided to put it in the middle. The next decision will be the sea, whether to have a large area of sea or a thinner area of sea. The problem in this painting, I'm going to make it quite a thin area of sea to show up the green, so using a darker blue, and that will give me more space to have a bit of fun in the sky with colour, with balloons or airplanes, whatever I decide to put in. This is a painting a little bit further down the road, in that more of the details put in, the balloons in the sky and Devonport Guildhall and some of the people. I'll show you a close-up in the moment and you'll see that some of the images aren't finished, but they still use the same technique of building up layers. So balloon will just start off with a bright colour, red, yellow or whatever, and then the pattern will slowly be built up on that balloon. All the colours will have those extra coats of paint to make them really stand out. So we'll have a look at some of the figures and balloons in close-up so that you can see how that works. The balloons at the top, you will see, have different degrees of detail. The yellow ones had 7 coats of yellow in the background, and I'm now starting to build up a pattern of diamonds on the front. Different patterns on different balloons. No clouds in this picture at the moment, so I haven't decided about that. There's no details yet on the Guildhall, but the people look very, very strange. So I'm just painting the clothes, and some of them patterns have started to appear, that one on the right hand side, but the majority of them haven't got any detail yet. So these clothes will be built up, the patterns will be painted on, and then the skin tones will be put in at the last moment. You'll see that's also happening on the hoe. So this is a painting really in about the middle stage, still got a lot of work to go into it. It's the final detail really that makes all the difference to a picture, and that's what takes the time. A painting like this would take me about 40 to 60 hours to complete. The smaller paintings, the 7x5s that you saw earlier on, still take about 8 to 10 hours. This is a very special painting on the easel behind me. It's a picture of the Mayflower, and one of 5 paintings I produced for the celebrations that are occurring this year of the 400th celebration of the Mayflower sailing from Plymouth to America. It is a picture that has an image size of 12 inches by 16 inches, and it's acrylic on canvas. But the special thing about this painting is that it's been donated to St. Luke's, and is going to be auctioned off later in the year to raise money for their charity. All the funds from this picture will go to St. Luke's. The auction is going to occur in Plymouth, at Plymouth Auction Room, and the auctioneer will be Paul Keane, whom I'm sure you will remember from last year with his involvement in the Elmer auction. The auction date is actually supposed to be on the day of the sailing, which is in September, but that has to be unsure at the moment because of the coronavirus difficulty. So just keep an eye on local press. You will be able to bid for it by either going to the auction in person or bidding online. So I do hope you'll get a look at it and perhaps think of putting in a bid to help St. Luke's in their journey. Well, I hope you enjoyed the trip around the studio today and looking at some of my work. Painting is a great way to relax, but it also is very therapeutic, and I find it's good to raise the mood, not just in producing something that's bright and cheerful, but the actual process of being creative and painting. Just putting the paint on the canvas can cheer you up when you're feeling a bit down, and certainly in the end you'll produce something that makes you feel brighter. This is a great start to start with because it doesn't really matter if you make a mistake. I often make a mistake and I can either cover up blots of paint and turn them into balloons or seagulls. Also remember, you haven't got the challenge of trying to create something that specifically looks like the scene that you're painting. It can look very different, but it doesn't mean it isn't a great piece of art. So just something to think of taking up for those of you who don't paint. Start with acrylics. They're very easy to use. They're water-based, so it's easy to wash the brushes. And even the cheaper paints are very good for starting off. You don't have to paint on canvas. Canvas board is, though, very good to start with because it's resilient. I tend to paint mainly on canvas now, and I have a certain texture in the canvas which I find fits my work. But that's something that varies with everybody. But do remember, this is not the only way to paint. We all paint in different ways. We have all different techniques, and there isn't a right or wrong way to produce a picture. But do have a go. I've really enjoyed showing you around the studio today. Thank you for joining me. If you want to see more of my work, then keep an eye on my Instagram account, which is Brian Pollard Art. I post about every 10 days when I produced a new picture, so there's lots of artwork to look at on there. I hope you enjoyed.